one of the most beneficial things that I've found to do in my life is to spend time in solitude. And I find that a lot of people just totally overlook that. And I guess it's easy to do. We're all busy. There's reasons, a lot of good reasons for it. You may have a wife and kids. We've all got to work to survive and provide and all that kind of stuff. But we also waste a lot of time, myself included. We all do a lot of doom scrolling. Social media is just so addictive. If we're to be honest, we can find the time to spend in solitude. And I got to thinking about this in a time of solitude while the good Lord was connecting some dots for me. And it's absolutely no coincidence that Jesus himself spent time in solitude. It's very well documented in the Gospels that it was normal for Jesus to retreat out into the wild or nature. He would leave early in the mornings, go spend time in solitude, in prayer, things like that. And what solitude does for me is it helps me sort of comprehend things, connect the dots. I feel like in all the things that I consume, whether it's in what I read, what I watch, the scripture that I study, my thoughts, whatever it is, when I take the time for solitude and I don't allow for any distractions, and I'm not just talking about solitude from other people, but absolutely leaving the phone out of it, any technology, just literally you and your own thoughts and God, I found that that's when all of the dots get connected. That's when I start to comprehend things in a way that I never would be able to had I not just simply taken the time to think in solitude without distraction. And you may say that you're scared to death to be with your own thoughts. And, we all live different lives. I'm not here to judge. But what I can tell you is the reason that you're scared to be with your own thoughts is because you're never with your own thoughts. The only way to get comfortable being alone with your own thoughts is to be alone with your own thoughts. And that's just all there is to it. Now, almost 20 years ago, I was afraid to be alone with my own thoughts and decided to turn to alcohol. And that turned into 15 years of being afraid to be alone with my own thoughts, and I medicated with alcohol. And 3 short years ago, they feel like short years because time's been flying ever since I decided to stop drinking. I've learned to be alone with my own thoughts. And at first it was scary, and I'll be honest with you though, it's become my favorite thing. I absolutely prioritize solitude now in a way that I never did. And I'm not antisocial. I'm not saying that you have to be a loner or, anything like that. I still have a social life. I get all the interaction with other humans that I want and need in a healthy way. But I prioritize solitude every single day of my life, even if it's for a short period of time. Now, we can all do that in a different way. I choose to come out in nature. I'm out here as many days as I can be. I'm literally, reading scripture and just appreciating creation for what it is. And in that, I have time to think, and I always pray before I start studying scripture and before I just, come out here and sit. I always pray that God guides my thoughts. But it has absolutely become one of my favorite things. Another thing that I do, and actually it's kind of, so I've started running. I know that I don't have the physique. You wouldn't think that if I didn't tell you that, but I guess it was probably 5 or 6 months ago I started running, and it actually started as going for a walk through the woods, and I just love nature, so I really enjoyed that. And it was like, man, this is great. I've got time to think. I'm away from things. I didn't have my phone with me. I didn't have service where I was, but I've learned to just leave my phone in the truck. But anyways, that turned into like walk running, and now I've gotten to where I can actually run. And the reason that I have been able to be consistent and keeping a schedule and running almost every day now, I've learned, is because I'm actually doing it more for the like mental and spiritual aspect of it and the time in solitude than I am for the physical benefit. Now, the physical benefit is great. You know, you feel a lot better. I'm losing some weight and all that's great. But honestly, what really gets me out there almost every day is the idea that I get to spend some time in solitude. And I will tell you that I have been able to put far more thoughts together and started to comprehend more important things that I have learned and consumed and things like that through just asking God to guide my thoughts and spending that time in solitude than I ever would had I not spent the time to do it. You know, in all that we consume, God leaves these breadcrumbs for us. And, you know, we get these ideas and all of that. And even, you know, they even say when you sleep, your brain just sort of starts to file the important stuff away. I feel like when we spend some time in solitude and while we're consciously awake and we're thinking, that's when we take those thoughts and actually start to connect them. And I have had more epiphanies and more just things that like I understood a lot of the components of them, but didn't really understand the whole idea. I've had more of that come together just spending time in solitude than I ever would have if I would have stayed distracted. It's been absolutely wild. It's gotten to a point that now I'm lucky enough that for work, I'm able to make my living usually in a little over 100 days a year. So I get a lot of time off. And in my off season, I like to go camping and I love nature. I love being outside. And I found that I find myself wanting to do more of that just by myself. I still do it with others because I enjoy the camaraderie and I enjoy sharing those experiences with others. But I have found that I've really started to also really enjoy spending that time by myself. And when I really realized that that was important is there was one night, this was a few months ago, I was laying in my tent and I read scripture every night, you know, to what extent, it just, it varies. But I read some scripture every night and I was laying in my tent, you know, and I had been sort of out in the woods exploring some things for a couple of days and I was reading scripture and I realized that I was paying more attention to what I was reading. I was trying to be more thoughtful about what I was reading and comprehend what I was reading far more than I do when I'm laying in bed at home. You know, the lady's next to you. There may be something playing on the TV. The cat's walking across you. It's like there's always just some sort of outside stimulus. And like I'm just not as able to be as present and as mindful. And so it's very important to me to be able to do that, particularly when I'm studying scripture, because to me, there's really nothing important in this world other than God and the scripture that he's given us and things like that. So there's nothing more important. So anyways, too many people totally underestimate and absolutely gloss over the idea that solitude is incredibly powerful. It's something that we all need in our lives. As Christians, we are to take up our cross and follow Jesus. He also tells us that he is the way. And in that, when Jesus went out into nature or whatever it is, he went out and he spent time in solitude. And you can do it in whatever way you need to do it. Not everybody can come out here in nature. I totally understand that. But he did that for a reason. And we are to model our lives after Jesus, be more like him. It is, you know, it's no accident that that's recorded in Scripture as much as it is. So it's our command to be more like Jesus. So we should spend time in solitude. There's a reason for it. So anyways, I mean, I know that time is tight for everybody, but it'll help you comprehend things in ways that you never would have otherwise. And another thing, speaking of comprehension, that I've learned in a time of solitude is that I'm never going to comprehend everything. And I've had to just be okay with that idea, which is a little bit different for me because I'm a very analytical person. Very, I guess a lot of people would call it scientific minded. Or, it's one of those things like you really got to prove things to me for me to buy into them. I'm very skeptical by nature. But I've learned that, look, that I'm never going to comprehend it all. Like, how am I going to comprehend how this creation, all of this, like all of Scripture and God and us in the supernatural realm and all of this, how am I to comprehend this one? Literally, I can't fully comprehend even how I'm showing up on your screen right now through this electronic device that I'm looking at that's got some curved pieces of glass and, a sensor and all that's being written onto a tiny little memory card that I'm going to stick in another machine, and then it's going to, through magic, show up on your screen. It seems like magic through the airwaves, through something that's not even plugged in, probably through Wi-Fi or a cellular connection or something that I don't even understand how this is happening. What in the world would make me think that I can comprehend all of creation? So I know that was a little bit of a tangent I went on, but that's a big question a lot of people have about Christianity. People are like, oh, well, how do you know? It's never been seen or proven. Like, nobody knows it all. But anyways, spend the time, carve out the time for solitude. I know you're busy, but I promise that 30 minutes of solitude in a day is far more beneficial and rejuvenative and restful than an hour of sleep. That's all I got for you today. Good talk.